Are all MVP trophies created equal? Absolutely not. And today we're settling this debate once and for all by breaking down every single NFL MVP winner into 7 distinct levels that reveal the uncomfortable truth. Some MVPs are all-time legendary seasons that changed football forever, while others are head-scratching decisions that make you wonder what the voters were thinking. This isn't about disrespecting anyone's achievements. Every MVP had a great season. But great and greatest aren't the same thing. And it's time we had an honest conversation about which trophies belong in the pantheon of football immortality and which ones deserve an asterisk in the history books. We're going from the bottom up, starting with the MVPs that sparked the most controversy and working our way to the absolute pinnacle of quarterback and running back dominance. By the end of this breakdown, you'll have a completely new perspective on MVP voting, positional value, and what actually constitutes the most valuable player in the league. Let's dive into Level 1 where things get immediately uncomfortable. Level 1 is the controversial MVP tier. These aren't bad seasons by any stretch, but they're seasons where the winner's value case falls apart when you line it up against monster performances from other positions, teammates who arguably deserved it more, or voting contexts that just didn't make sense. Starting with the most bizarre MVP selection in NFL history, Mark Moseley in 1982. Yes, a kicker won MVP. During a strike-shortened season, Moseley was clutch and accurate, hitting big kicks when it mattered. But let's be real, this probably should have gone to a quarterback or a defensive wrecking ball who actually changed games. Dan Fouts was piloting an elite passing attack in an era that still punished quarterbacks over the middle, throwing for 280 yards per game with 17 touchdowns. Lawrence Taylor was already storming off the edge, changing protections, shrinking playbooks, and terrorizing offensive coordinators. This is a classic case of voters rewarding steadiness in a chaotic season rather than actual most valuable player credentials. Was Moseley valuable? Sure. Most valuable in the entire league? The eye test and positional value says absolutely not. Now let's jump to 2024, where Josh Allen wins and Lamar Jackson doesn't. Here's what makes this genuinely strange. The same pool of voters gave one player more first-team All-Pro support, then handed MVP to the other guy. That inconsistency is what lands this in Level 1. Allen's load-bearing value was absolutely real. Rushing threat, arm talent, high usage rate. He finished with over 3,700 passing yards and 40 total touchdowns. But when your All-Pro ballot says best at the position and your MVP ballot says not that guy, something got weird fast. Especially when Lamar had a historic 5,000-yard total season with 41 touchdowns and just 4 interceptions. When your All-Pro ballot and MVP ballot don't align, you've got a consistency problem. Brett Favre in 1997 won co-MVP with Barry Sanders, but here's the issue. Barry Sanders ripped off one of the most absurd stretches of rushing dominance we've ever witnessed. Favre was incredible, no question. But if we're awarding value that year, Barry should have stood alone. Co-MVP usually signals a voting committee that couldn't agree on what value really meant, so they split the difference rather than making the hard call. Fran Tarkenton in 1975 is another odd case. Respect the efficiency and the wins. He ran the show for a contender. But look at who lived in his shadow that year. Mel Blount was locking up receivers in the toughest bump-and-run era football has ever seen. O.J. Simpson was putting up yards when boxes were loaded and defenses knew exactly what was coming. Terry Bradshaw was the do-it-all weapon on a championship team. This is the classic quarterback gravity problem where we tend to reward the distributor on a top seed even when other players were clearly more dominant. John Elway in 1987 had a great year, absolutely. But here's the Jerry Rice argument that should have won. Rice dominated with scoring bursts that flipped game scripts, setting records with 22 total touchdowns. Joe Montana, the man throwing all those touchdowns, was also in the mix with a legitimate case. Elway's ability to improvise and his comeback gene won narrative points, but Rice was essentially a multiplier on every single down. Was Elway impactful and great? Yes. But the positional tax on wide receivers tilted the outcome in a way that probably wasn't fair. These are all MVP winners, so obviously they didn't have bad seasons. They're just controversial when you examine the context and competition. Moving to level 2, where there's less controversy and more legitimate coin flips between elite seasons that both completely check the boxes. Level 2 is the coin flip tier, where you can argue either side and not be wrong. The winner earned it, but the runner-up had an equally compelling case. Ken Stabler in 1974 piloted an offense that led the league in scoring with 26 touchdowns while coming up big in late moments. But you had multiple other legitimate candidates. Franco Harris was a yards-from-scrimmage machine. Mean Joe Green wrecked protections with 4 fumble recoveries and 9 sacks. The committee showed they cared about Stabler's late-game heroics and team record more, but the eye test says Green's disruption fit most valuable depending on how you weigh non-quarterback impact. Terry Bradshaw in 1978 ascended as a vertical thrower and delivered in high-leverage downs for a top seed with a league-leading 28 touchdowns. However, Earl Campbell as a rookie was legitimately different. He ran through loaded boxes in an era that begged you to pass, setting a tone that changed entire game plans with 1,450 rushing yards and 13 touchdowns. If you value explosive passing on a team with historic defense, Bradshaw's your pick. If you grade by who the defense feared most and who carried the snap-to-snap load, Campbell's case is alive. Neither answer is wrong. Peyton Manning's 2008 season was surgical. He adjusted protections and dissected 2 high structures with timing only he possessed. But Drew Brees authored a volume campaign that bent the scoreboards every week with over 5,000 yards and 34 touchdowns. James Harrison headlined a defense that won with pressure and intimidation, recording 16 sacks and winning Defensive Player of the Year. If you care about degree of difficulty against disguise-heavy looks, you've got Peyton. If you prize relentless production or defensive game-wrecking ability, you've got Brees or Harrison. This one was genuinely tough. Brian Sipe in 1980 delivered clutch drives and maximized the system, totaling over 4,100 yards and 30 touchdowns. But Lester Hayes posted a shutdown year that altered route trees before the snap. Earl Campbell sustained his dominance. You can justify Sipe for execution and wins, Hayes for coverage island effect that lets you blitz and roll coverage elsewhere, or Campbell for doing Earl Campbell things. It's a legitimate triangle of value with no clear winner. Lamar Jackson's 2023 season was arguably one of the weakest MVP campaigns in the past 20 years, even though he was the most dynamic engine on the best team in the league. The coin flip comes from Christian McCaffrey, who was Offensive Player of the Year for a reason with yards, touchdowns, and chain-moving consistency. Dak Prescott put up peak efficiency numbers on high volume and difficulty. If your criteria is best player on the best team, you've got Lamar. If it's most productive non-quarterback or best pure passer that season, you've got CMC or Dak. All 3 cases live in the same neighborhood. Level 3 is the solid season tier. These aren't Mount Rushmore years, but they're legitimately great MVP campaigns. Steve McNair in 2003 is one of the most underrated MVP winners ever. Co-MVP with Peyton Manning that year, but his case stands completely on its own. McNair played through pain, changed protections pre-snap, and hit shot plays outside structure when calls broke down. He threw for 15 yards and 24 touchdowns with a league-leading 100.4 passer rating. The eye test shows command, play-action mastery, and quarterback run threats in short yardage. He didn't ride a stat wave. He set a tone that defenses had to respect every single snap. Thurman Thomas in 1991 was a force multiplier as runner, receiver, and blitz identifier. The K-gun tempo only works if your back reads fronts, wins in the flats, and makes linebackers wrong on every snap. Thomas gave them that and more, finishing with over 2,000 scrimmage yards and 12 total touchdowns while helping the Bills reach their 2nd straight Super Bowl. He wasn't just piling up yards, he was unlocking no-huddle stress before defenses had the substitution tools they have now. Boomer Esiason in 1988 was a clinic in scheme fit. He weaponized misdirection and rhythm, reading half-field keys and selling fakes that held linebackers. Over 3,500 passing yards and 28 total touchdowns led the Bengals all the way to the Super Bowl. Rich Gannon in 2002 conducted a pre-snap doctorate with empty sets, choice routes, and option concepts. He threw with anticipation to grass, not just receivers, punishing zones with his eyes and feet. A league-leading 418 completions and 4,600 yards led them to the Super Bowl. It wasn't the flashiest MVP, but it was the cleanest operation on the field that season. Level 4 is the great season tier where MVPs start stressing coordinators on Tuesdays. These seasons didn't just check boxes. They bent game plans and carried real playoff gravity. Sean Alexander's 2005 season was the definition of offensive force. Behind a dominant offensive line, he stacked touchdowns and controlled tempo with a league-leading 1,880 rushing yards and 27 touchdowns. Was it system-aided? Absolutely. But he was the right back in the right system, punishing lighter boxes created by play action. Matt Ryan's 2016 MVP was precision personified. He operated a balanced attack that punished every coverage rule, hitting everything in rhythm with anticipation. Red zone efficiency in the top 10, total yards second, points scored first. You prepared to take away one thing, he beat you with the second, third, and fourth answer. He lifted both the baseline and ceiling until that Super Bowl collapse. Marcus Allen in 1985 blended patience, vision, and finish with a league-leading 1,759 rushing yards and over 2,300 total scrimmage yards. Joe Theismann in 1983 made Washington's system hum with protection, discipline, and route structure, throwing for over 3,700 yards and 29 touchdowns on the way to a Super Bowl appearance. Emmitt Smith in 1993 stabilized scripts, kept the defense fresh, and made every 2nd and 4 seem automatic with 1,486 rushing yards. He made the most important downs look routine, and routine wins titles. Joe Montana's 1989 campaign with 3,521 passing yards and a league-leading 112.4 passer rating led the Niners to demolishing the Broncos in the Super Bowl. He read leverage like a chess master, hitting outlets without ego. That sounds simple, but it's devastating. It cripples pass rush. Safeties sit flat-footed because the ball is out. Then he takes calculated deep shots when you creep. He was the GOAT before the GOAT for a reason. Level 5 is the special season tier where dominance meets difficulty. Earl Campbell in 1979 ran into 8-man boxes and still moved chains. Power with purpose in an era without spacing gifts or light nickel boxes. 1,797 rushing yards and 19 touchdowns, while winning both MVP and Offensive Player of the Year. Campbell was the identity and the closer, draining clock and forcing safeties to tackle 30 times per game. Teams adjusted their entire week just to survive him. Walter Payton in 1977 was sweetness at his peak. He created yardage that wasn't blocked, cutting outside zones into stiff fronts through creases that weren't really there with 1,852 yards and 14 touchdowns. Without modern spread concepts or consistent passing threats to lighten boxes, he was the situational football answer key. Adrian Peterson in 2012 came off a torn ACL and ripped explosives out of base runs when defenses sold out. No motion sleight of hand, no college concepts, just downhill violence. Over 2,000 yards, finishing just 9 yards short of Eric Dickerson's single-season record. He dragged the Vikings to 10-6 and remains the last non-quarterback to win MVP. Lawrence Taylor in 1986 changed the math on offense. Protection slides, tight end chips, backs staying in for help, all started with number 56. He didn't just sack quarterbacks. He forced quick throws, bad reads, and scared play calling. 20.5 sacks led the Giants to blowing out the Broncos in the Super Bowl. Alan Page's 1971 interior dominance beat double teams with get-off, hands, and a motor that ran hot for 60 minutes with 7 sacks and league-leading 2 safeties. Steve Young in 1994 perfected efficiency, marrying West Coast quick game to elite movement and deep shot accuracy. 3969 passing yards, and a league-leading 35 touchdowns with 112.8 passer rating. He finally got over the hump, blowing out the Chargers in the Super Bowl. Special season MVPs don't just beat you, they change how you feel by halftime. You're tired earlier, late to gaps, and your third down menu shrinks. Level 6 is the era-defining season tier. These MVPs didn't ride trends, they set them. Cam Newton in 2015 gave us power quarterback as short yardage hammer. The red zone became a cheat code because Cam carried like a back and threw like a striker. 45 total touchdowns and 37 passing yards dragged an awful receiving corps to the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson in 2019 was the dual-threat revolution finished product. Designed leverage with defenses in conflict on every snap. He led the Ravens to first in team rushing, first in passing touchdowns, and set the NFL single-season quarterback rushing record with over 1,300 yards. He reset what mobile meant, making speed a scheme, not just a trait. Patrick Mahomes authored 2 templates. 2018 was arm talent plus aggression with over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns in his first year starting. 2022 flipped the script with patience, punishing light boxes, mastering quick game, and turning boring football into a machine with another 5,000 yards and a Super Bowl win. One player authored 2 answers to 2 different defensive eras. Marshall Faulk in 2000 was the modern space back with over 2,100 scrimmage yards and league-leading 18 touchdowns. The Rams turned the backfield into a third receiving position. Barry Sanders in 1997 broke the loaded box equals stalemate rule with 25-33 rushing yards and 11 touchdowns, normalizing volatility for upside. Terrell Davis in 1998 was zone run textbook with a league-leading 2,008 yards and 21 touchdowns, rushing the Broncos to back-to-back Super Bowl wins. Jim Brown set the foundation for everything with 1527 yards and 17 touchdowns in 1958, making volume with efficiency a viable championship path. Level 7 is the best of the best. MVP immortality. Dan Marino in 1984 threw for a record 58-44 passing yards and 48 touchdowns that held for decades. Era adjusted, this is volcanic. In a league allowing hands-on receivers with heavier personnel, he launched a vertical passing clinic from a static pocket. Raw passing difficulty at its absolute peak. Peyton Manning's 2004 season with 4,500 yards and record 49 touchdowns, then 2013 with 5,400 yards and record 55 touchdowns. What separates Peyton is control. He didn't rely on chaos, he erased it. Brett Favre in 1995 threw for league-leading 44-13 yards and 38 touchdowns, weaponizing second reaction within structure. O.J. Simpson's 1973 season with over 2,000 yards and 12 touchdowns in just 14 games was inevitable dominance. LaDainian Tomlinson in 2006 was the modern running back template with over 1,800 rushing yards and record 31 total touchdowns. Kurt Warner in 1999 went from bagging groceries to MVP with over 4,300 yards and 41 touchdowns, completely breaking the NFL as the greatest show on turf. Aaron Rodgers in 2011 threw for 46-43 yards and 45 touchdowns with just 6 interceptions and 122.4 passer rating. 2020 was surgical with 42-99 yards, 48 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and 121 passer rating. Tom Brady in 2007 had the best MVP season ever with over 4,800 yards and record-setting 50 touchdowns going 16-0 before losing to Eli Manning. He didn't just throw to stars, he made stars. That's the gold standard. There you have it. The 7 levels of NFL MVPs from controversial to absolute godlike dominance. Some trophies represent the pinnacle of football achievement. Others represent voters getting it wrong or settling for safe choices. Understanding these levels gives you the framework to evaluate every MVP debate with actual context instead of just looking at trophy counts. If you made it this far, Drop a comment with where you think recent MVP winners fit in these tiers. Hit that like button if this changed how you think about MVP voting, and subscribe because we're breaking down the biggest debates in football with the honest analysis nobody else wants to give you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.